YouTube, Autumn Beckman here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My channel is usually about luxury on a budget relating to handbags, luxury handbags. But this video and the last video are a little different. They're both about photography. A lot of you know that I'm a photography teacher by trade. That's how I earn all my handbag money. And I get questions all the time from my students' parents and sometimes from you guys about what camera you should buy. So I've put together this little video specifically for you. I cannot suggest specific cameras for you. The camera that you will want depends on a lot of different things. Different people want different things out of their cameras. So let's start with that. It's going to depend on what you want to do with it. Do you want just snapshots of family events, or do you want more professional looking portraits? Are you looking to take wedding photos, like your daughter's wedding is coming up or a cousin's wedding and they've asked you to take pictures because you have a nice camera and you don't want to admit that you don't know how to use it? By the way, if that's the case, don't shoot a wedding. You get one shot at that if they don't have another photographer that they have paid to do something. And if something happens with your camera or your memory cards or your batteries dies or something, not a good situation to be in. I personally would never agree to shoot a friend or family wedding. I would only do that if I was being paid and I had multiple cameras and batteries and I really knew what I was doing. And I have shot weddings. So I do not recommend wedding photography if you're just starting out with cameras. Not a good idea. Or you might want to do landscapes or sports. You need different settings for all those different things. So the camera you buy is going to depend on what you're wanting to shoot with it. It also depends on the kind of photo or video quality you want out of the image. So for example, are you wanting just to put some pictures on Instagram, or do you want to print photos and blow them up poster size? That will affect your camera decision. It will depend on the portability that you need out of the camera. Do you need something that fits in your pocket or your purse, or can you carry a giant heavy camera bag around? Is that why I have back problems? Might be. Depends on whether you want the ability to change lenses. It very much depends on how much you want to spend. Cameras, camera gear, lenses, all very expensive. You can get cheap versions, but then you're getting cheap versions. It also depends on what other features you might want in a camera. So do you want, this one doesn't have this, but do you want a screen that will fold out or fold up, or can it just be attached to the camera and you can't move it? Do you need, it's hard to see over here, but a little door that has like a microphone port? Do you need a hot shoe on top that you can attach a microphone, or a flash that you're gonna hold away from the camera? Never take pictures with the flash on top of the camera. It's the worst possible light that you can ever use because it's directly on a person. You want, if you're gonna use a flash, you need a cable that attaches to the flash and then that fits in your hot shoe so you can move the flash around. You also need a soft box on it in a lot of cases. Personally, I never buy a camera that does not have manual settings. I think all DSLRs like this, where you can remove the lens, these giant cameras, they're gonna have the manual settings. I talked about that in the last video. If you don't know what the manual settings are, just go back and watch that for an idea. But my point and shoot, this is an expensive fancy one. This has manual settings too, right there on that wheel there, my mode dial. Oh, this one has the articulating screen I was talking about, where I can do not so much selfies, but vlogging, where I can see myself. And then if I want to put the camera on the ground, I can fold that up and look down at it. Or if I'm holding it up above me in a crowd, I can see the screen still. I found that a very useful feature to have. I don't have that on any of my DSLRs, but I don't need it on those. This is where I needed it. So know what you need the camera for. That's a big tip right there. Your camera sensor is going to determine the quality of the images that you have, and the sensor will also, anything we talk about is going to affect the price of your camera. So you can get a point and shoot that's less than $100, or you can spend thousands on a DSLR and accessories like lenses for that. You can spend thousands just on a single lens or a single camera body. So you really have to know what your budget is. I will say, if you get a DSLR camera body, you're going to have the most options because you can switch lenses out. You can buy a DSLR that has a kit lens, which is just a lens that comes with the camera. Those vary. It's not just one kind of lens. It's usually a standard zoom that goes from maybe 24 to 70 or something like that millimeters. which is the distance that you're able to zoom. You have the most functionality, generally speaking, with the DSLR cameras. So it's not like you'd have to invest in everything you ever wanted at once. With a DSLR, you could make an initial investment and then you could add to that over time. So maybe there's a lens you want you can't afford yet, but you can get it later. But back to the camera sensors. I talked about sensors in the last video. It's inside the camera body, and the sensor is where your photograph, all the information for your photograph is recorded. So that's a very, very important part of the camera. Point and shoots, the regular ones that are $100 or less, or even just a couple $100s, they have tiny, tiny little sensors. So if you ever wanted to print that photograph out and blow it up, the picture might not look so good. But if you get a DSLR, you can get one that has a much larger sensor, that if you ever wanted to print that image out and blow it up, you could do that and it would still look great. Let's talk lenses for a second. That's very important depending on what you're doing. Lenses, when you go to look at what they're called, the names of them, and sort of define, well, what is this lens? How is it different from this other lens? Mine has that information right here on this silver ring, which is kind of hard to see because of the glare, but it says Canon zoom lens EF 70 to 200 millimeter, 2.8 LIS USM. I actually don't know what all of that means. I can tell you that a zoom is where you can zoom in and out, but there are also lenses called prime lenses where they're fixed. You can't zoom, it's just whatever distance it is. 70 to 200 is that distance. So this will zoom out 70, that's the wider shot, or zoom in 200, that's a tighter shot where, let's say I'm doing sports photography, I would need a big zoom lens like this where I can zoom in onto the field if I'm up in the bleachers or something, or on the sidelines. The 2.8 number is the aperture, which I talked about in the previous video, and that would be the lowest number aperture that this would go. 2.8 is pretty low. That'll work well in low light settings. If you're doing indoor portraits, indoor photography, weddings, all that, you need low number apertures where you can get more light because you're often shooting in low light settings. The L is just a Canon thing. The IS is for image stabilization. I always go for an IS lens, an image stabilized lens, because that's a built-in thing that helps your pictures not be so blurry when you're hand holding, or even if it's on a tripod and there's a little wind or something. It's worth a little bit of extra money to get the IS lens. That aperture, the 2.8 here, that is generally where you're gonna see the biggest price differences in the lens that you get. The lower number aperture a lens has, the crazier expensive it will be. So that's a trade-off there. If you are doing low light photography, like wedding photography, you need a low number aperture. Be prepared to pay up for it. And I'm not talking $20, $50, I'm talking hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars, for a difference between like a 1.2 and a 3.4. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. Doesn't seem like there's that much difference between 1.2 and 3.4, but there is. I mentioned the L on this lens and that that's a Canon thing. What it is it indicates that this lens is a sturdier build than one that doesn't have the L, a Canon lens that doesn't have the L on it. So what that means realistically for the photographer is that lens would be less susceptible to things like water. It doesn't mean it's waterproof. It just means that it would be less susceptible to water getting inside crevices, or I've been out shooting in sand dunes before and there's wind, so it's less susceptible to sand getting blown into it. Just a sturdy, hardier built lens. Very important if you're shooting in the elements a lot. Not any lens will fit any camera body. The camera companies make sure of that, so you have to buy their lenses. So check to make sure if you're buying a lens for your camera that the bracket will fit right here. The lens will fit onto the camera. It has to be a certain kind of setting, and you'd have to look at your camera to figure out what that is. There are third-party lenses though. There's a company called Sigma that's a great company that makes lenses for Canon and Nikon and other brands. And they make pretty much the same lenses, but for quite a bit cheaper because they're not those brand names. Sigma is a very well-respected company in the photography industry, and you can feel pretty safe buying a lens from them and saving a good amount of money. I would say you can buy the third-party lenses, but don't buy third-party batteries, at least not in my experience. When I have purchased a battery for one of my cameras that's a third party, say off Amazon, it never seems to hold a charge as long as my Canon batteries. And the Canon batteries are bloody expensive. They're $50+ for each little battery. It's ridiculous, but it is worth it when you're shooting and you need it not to die on you. And they last a long time. And I don't just mean in one shooting setting, but like over the lifetime of the battery, they last a while. I've never had a Canon battery go bad on me. Another thing to think about if you are just getting into photography or into camera gear is to remember that unlike our luxury handbags, cameras do not hold their value, nor do lenses. You can pay a few $1,000s for something, and the following year or two, the company that made, let's say, the camera you bought is gonna come out with a new model, and now suddenly the value of yours drops outrageously. What I would recommend if you think that you're really not sure if you want to get into photography, but you want to give it a try, there are places you can rent equipment. You just have to look those up because they'd be in your area. I'm sure there are some online too. I don't know much about them, I just know that they exist. There are also places that you can buy used equipment, and that would be a great place to start. The biggest two places for that would be Adorama and B&H Photo. Both of those are out of New York City. And I've also purchased camera gear off Amazon, but I've never purchased it used. And there are often, at least with Canon, I assume a lot of the other brands would have the same thing, there are often sales throughout the year, and like if Canon has a sale, then Amazon and Best Buy and everybody else, Adorama, B&H, they're all gonna have the same sale. So be aware of that if there's something you're looking at. Now, if something you're looking at is brand new, it was just released, it probably won't go on sale anytime soon, so be aware of that too. Well, I know I didn't tell you what kind of camera to get here, but I hope that the information I gave you helped to figure out what was important for the kind of photography that you want to do. And then my previous video would also help with that. Like if you're doing action photography, like you want to get into sports photography, for example, you need to know about shutter speed, so you need to go back and watch that video. Or if you want to do portraits, you need to know about aperture, so you'll need to go back and watch that video. Good luck, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I cannot recommend specific cameras. People always want me to do that, and I just can't. It depends on so many things, and then the cameras change all the time anyway, so I wouldn't want to put a certain camera in the comment section below and then somebody find this video 5 years from now and that camera is like out of date or so. So just figure out what kind of photography you want to do, and then what features of the camera you need to be able to do that, or what features would help you do that best, and find a camera in your price range that has those features. And that's the best advice I can give you, really. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic day. Bye.